because I know the business case for diversity, and you have to have a diverse group of people around the table if you really want to be as successful as you can be. And so we took that on. So we laid out that vision, laid out a set of values, and then I had one-on-one with all the employees, and then made some leadership changes. And
Wow.
so now we have almost 50% women in leadership and 47% people of color. And so
Wow.
diversity matters. It matters.
So your goal was to set the NBA standard for leadership, for diversity and inclusion. And are you now the most diverse and inclusive leadership team for an NBA organization?
I know we're somewhere at the top. We actually ended up getting the NBA's Diversity and Inclusion Award in January.
Wow.
For all of the work that we have done.
All right, guys. So just because you are a billionaire, that does not mean that you are smart, okay? It apparently does not take a lot of intelligence or common sense to become a billionaire in the United States of America. Really shows you how much opportunity actually is in this country when somebody as dumb as Mark Cuban can become a billionaire, despite the fact that apparently he has a IQ of room temperature, okay? And his IQ is so low that he openly admitted on X of breaking the law and didn't even know that that's what he was doing as an executive. And now he's facing some hot water, right? He could be facing some lawsuits for openly admitting out loud that organizations that he run, they hire based off race and gender, okay? Or put it this way, it's a part of the equation, which apparently is illegal. And Mark Cuban did not know that you cannot consider race and gender when it comes to hiring, okay? But because this guy has now been converted into a woke revolutionary, he worships at the altar of DEI. He decided to essentially put this out here that he's openly breaking the law as a virtue signal to the world about his ideology, and it could cost him a whole lot of money. So let's read what he wrote here, and then we're going to get into how this could backfire on Mark Cuban, okay? So he was responding to the Rabbit Hole, who said, I believe in a colorblind meritocracy. This means I am against forms of hiring which undercut merit, including forms of hiring which cut out merited individuals over their group associations. Okay, this is essentially what he's saying. I've answered plenty of your questions, so can you do one for me? Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Have you hired people on the basis of demographics on the belief that doing so better position your companies to succeed? Thank you. So Mark Cuban answers this question. Again, this was a part of his Ask Me Anything. He says, I've never hired anyone based exclusively on race, gender, religion. I only ever hire the person that will put my business in the best position to succeed. And yes, race and gender can be part of the equation. I view diversity as a competitive advantage. So there you have it. This guy just flat out openly saying that, yeah, we take race and gender into consideration when we hire, right? This is exactly what I do at my organizations, okay? This is probably a policy at his organization. Like, for example, the Dallas Mavericks, who has a black woman CEO. Now, why was she put into that position? No. According to Mark Cuban, he factors in race and gender when it comes to hiring. So, therefore, who knows? She could be a diversity hire, right? More than likely, she is a diversity hire. But we're going to come back to her a little bit later on in this video. He says, now, how would you propose finding organizations that give preference to white people? Why aren't you working as hard to show examples of white preference as you are DEI? You claim to abhor both. Well, because nobody's openly admitting that they're hiring whites based off their race, right? Again, that's the reason why, okay? I mean, it's really that simple. So, of course, he got destroyed in the comment section here, but there's one particular part of the comment section that he really gotten some hot water over is when EEOC Commissioner Andrea R. Lucas responded to Mark Cuban. Now, she is a commissioner at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and she responded to Mark Cuban, essentially destroying him. She says, EEOC commissioner here, unfortunately, you're dead wrong on black letter Title VII law. as a general rule, race/sex can't even be a motivating factor, nor a plus factor, tiebreaker, or tipping point. It's important employers understand the ground rules here. Again, so this guy is openly violating employment law, right? He just admitted it. Again, as an executive at his companies, he is discriminating against whites. This is exactly what he's admitting out loud. This is a real life community note here. And she did not stop there. She actually took to Fox News to continue to destroy Mark Cuban when it comes to his little virtue signal that seems to be likely to backfire that he put on the internet for the world to see. Take a look.
Welcome back. Billionaire investor Mark Cuban could be facing lawsuits after defending the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in hiring. Fox Business's Lydia Hu now with more on the story. Lydia.
Good morning, Maria. One employment lawyer told me she would not be surprised if a lawsuit was filed against Mark Cuban today. The billionaire posted this on X, quote, "I've never hired anyone based exclusively on race, gender, religion. I only ever hire the person that will put my business in the best position to succeed. And yes, race and gender can be part of that equation." The post has been seen by more than 5 million people, including Equal Employment Opportunity Commissioner Andrea Lucas, who replied on X saying this, quote, "Unfortunately, you're dead wrong. As a general rule, race/sex can't even be a motivating factor, nor a plus factor, tiebreaker, or tipping point." Here's more from her.
Mr. Cuban is conflating the idea that someone's race and sex can be part of the complete package, but that's not provided for under the law. And if he's using it as a factor, even if it's not the only factor or the dispositive factor, if it's any part of the decision, then it's a motivating factor, and that's illegal. Popular commentary on Twitter or X. Like his tweets illustrate a really common misunderstanding about the use of race and sex in employment decisions. And that common misunderstanding is that as long as you don't use race or sex as the dispositive factor or the sole factor, it's okay to use it as a plus factor. Now, that misunderstanding comes most likely from reliance on the old standards that were used in the university admissions context prior to the Supreme Court's decision this June in SSFA. When the Supreme Court overturned that, a lot of people haven't really tracked the update in the law. But in employment law, the standard has been universally restrictive. You're never allowed to use race or sex as a general matter in your employment decision, in whole or in part. Whereas in the university admissions context, you previously were allowed to use diversity basically as a plus factor. That's never been the case in employment law, but a lot of people seem to think that is permissible. The same rules for government and private companies apply in the employment space, and they've been consistent for decades. The motivating factor test has been around since the Civil Rights Act of 1991, and that's black letter law. It's the direct quote from Title VII is that if race or sex is used as a quote motivating factor, that's sufficient to show that you violated Title VII. Likewise, the EEOC's official position in our official race and color discrimination guidance says, quote, Title VII is violated if race was all or part of the motivation for an employment decision.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Now, I'm not going back to Mark Cuban's Twitter because he's filled up his timeline of retweets of people pointing out the fact that he's Jewish. Okay, so there's a lot of people on X pointing out the fact that Mark Cuban is Jewish, and he is resharing that on X as an example of the alleged hate and bigotry he experiences, right? This is what he's trying to do. So he is polluting his own timeline to ignore the fact that on Threads, he's essentially coping and doubling down with the fact that he definitely has violated law, right? He's violated employment law, and this is what he has to say on Threads about it. He says, the irony of all the Twitter fighting over there is that I don't get involved in hiring decisions at my companies. I haven't for years. LOL, I wasn't very good at it. It's just fun to argue on Twitter with Elon and his minions just because I can. Twitter isn't real world. It's an echo chamber, which makes it interesting for me to argue for argument's sake. It's not a place to have a serious or nuanced discussion about anything. That's where Threads is starting to get better and better. Well, Threads is dead, right? Nobody is on Threads, okay? And Mark Cuban claiming that he does not hire or that he isn't involved in hiring decisions is a lie, because he flat out just admitted here in his thread comments that he actually does get involved with hiring. He says, I'm not the CEO of any company, but as a major or primary investor, I can have final say, but I stick to where I can add value. I don't micromanage. He also says, no one over there even asked this if this was a roadmap for companies I'm involved with. It's not. As I said, I don't get involved in hiring. I should qualify that. The exception is 2 basketball jobs, and I'm not the CEO of any company. All of it was just what I believe and have seen work in my portfolio companies and others, but it's fun to argue over there. Okay, so basically what he's saying is that, yeah, he does get involved when it comes to hiring. Now, he may not necessarily have the diversity, equity, and inclusion roadmap for his Dallas Mavericks basketball team on the floor because, again, you don't have any Chinese, Asian women playing basketball for the Dallas Mavericks. So we know he don't believe in diversity, equity, inclusion when it comes to the actual game being played. But when it comes to the CEO of that company, who happens to be a black woman, Mark Cuban, as a major investor, who is involved with the operations of the team, you can't sit and try to tell me that he didn't have a say in her hiring, right? And if you are somebody that has a say and you're openly saying that, yeah, we consider race and gender as a factor, then basically anybody who applied for that position to be CEO can basically say, hey, look, Mark Cuban, a guy that I interviewed with for that job, picked this woman based off her race and her sex. They can make a reasonable claim with evidence, right, that they were discriminated against. If I am a white male, more specifically a straight white male, that applied to any one of Mark Cuban's companies, specifically for a position that Mark Cuban had a say-so or input in regards to who was hired, maybe a very, very, very high up position, like, for example, the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks, right? If you apply to be CEO of the Dallas Mavericks and you are a straight white male, you have a case against Mark Cuban, right? You may have a discrimination lawsuit against Mark Cuban because he openly admitted out loud that, yeah, I consider these factors when it comes to hiring, right? So, you know, who knows whether or not Mark Cuban will actually be sued. But one thing I do know is that it is extremely dumb to put yourself in a situation where you can be sued for openly talking about discriminating against people based off their race and their sex because you want woke virtue signaling points. Again, just because you're a billionaire, that doesn't mean that you're very smart. It doesn't make you very intelligent. And for Mark Cuban, clearly the elevator doesn't go all the way to the top floor. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.